signed. Committee Room 29, 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 signed. Committee Room 29. Sound. 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 Committee Room 29, signed. 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 Committee Room 29. Sound. 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 Committee Room 29, 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 Sound.
And she confirmed live.
Thank you. Okay, members, to Fáilte Rove Alig, all very welcome to this morning's meeting of the Committee for Communities. I would remind, I'll call the meeting to order and welcome all of you to the meeting, and remind everyone in the public gallery that mobile phones must be turned off. Mobile tablet devices can be used, however they must be used through a Wi-Fi connection, and all devices should be muted. Password details are available in the gallery for anyone wanting to connect via there. No recordings or photographs may be taken. Can I remind members about the protocols regarding the use of electronic devices? Please switch all mobile devices to airplane mode and activate your Wi-Fi connection. Please also use tablet devices discreetly and in a way which does not interfere with proceedings. And be aware of the cameras when using the tablet device. I would also like to remind you once again about the sensitivity of microphones. And finally, I would remind members of your responsibility to declare any interest in any of the items under discussion today. So, members, I would like to declare that I am an owner of a residential property from which rental income is received, and also that I am a secretary of Brantry, Coltus, Kiltory, Erin in relation to the arts sector. Any other interest members wish to highlight this morning?
I also am a member of Cultus.
Yeah, thank you.
Sure, charity trustee and private sector landlord.
Yeah, thank you, Andy. Yeah, I am a charity trustee also, Andy. Thank you for reminding me on that. Kelly or Sean, any interest that you wish to flag? No.
Chair, only to say that there's a communication there from Nilgosh, so just a member of the Nilgosh team. I think most of us are.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, I'm a trustee of a charity and a beneficiary of Nilgosh pension. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Okay, thank you, members. So, members, then you will recall at last week's meeting we agreed to ask the Minister to make himself available to attend the committee. And following reports that he met with the LCC, we asked that this be brought forward to an earlier date. It has now been confirmed that he will make himself available to attend our meeting on the 24th of October, which is next Thursday, instead of the 7th of November as originally scheduled. I would like to emphasise the Minister was coming to deal with a range of issues, including the Department's current financial situation and its ability to deliver the objectives set out in the departmental plan. So while the LCC will be a factor, we will be expecting the Minister to address those issues. And we'll take an opportunity, members, if there's anything that members wish to indicate that they would like the Minister to cover at next week's meeting, then we'll be able to advise them in advance. Are there any issues members wish to flag in that respect? Kelly?
Yes, Chair, thank you very much. If we could have a timeline as to when the housing supply strategy will be coming forward, that would be very helpful for the committee purposes.
Yeah, thank you. And I will also be very keen to explore the anti-poverty strategy and indeed the other strategies around which there's some indication that there may be further delays in. So that's an issue that I will certainly want to be looking into. Anything else, members, are content to move on? Yeah, thank you. So I do want to mention then the Older People's Parliament, which took place here in the building on Saturday, 12th of October, in the Assembly Chamber, which was a great opportunity for older people to have their say on issues and decisions that affect their lives. I know some of our members attended that event, and I believe it is essential for older people to have this forum, to have their voices heard and be able to communicate their lived experience to this place and to inform the decisions made here. So I think that was really good. Brian, do you want to say anything?
Yes, just I was in attendance at the event. I know Kelly Armstrong also was in attendance, and a number of other MLAs. Apologies, I can't recall if any other members of the committee were present, but I wasn't sure that I'd be able to stay for the full event, but I was, and I have to say I was very impressed by the contributions on the floor of the Assembly. Very useful information. I understand there will be a Hansard version available. I'm sure members will want to see that, and there'll be lots of very useful information for us to refer to. And I want to mention also, I understand our RAISE staff within the Assembly also assisted with some of the research, and so I just found it all very beneficial, and also just a pleasure to engage with people beforehand and after, and just see their enthusiasm for speaking up for older people and issues relevant to them.
Yeah. Thank you, Brian. Kelly?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, as Brian says, I was there. I was just actually thinking as an outcome of this, obviously it was raised about the active ageing strategy has not come forward as yet. We can ask the Minister certainly about that, but the Older Persons Commissioner is about to go out of office to be replaced by the new person. We don't know who that is yet. The recruitment process is ongoing, and it's right that we don't have any part in that. But I was just wondering if there's anything we could do with Eddie Lynch, just to ask him, following his 2 terms, are there any matters that he would like to depart, leave us with as he departs, because he's been a very strong advocate over the years. So I was just wondering if there's something we can ask for him in writing. I appreciate it's his last days in office, but it's just if we could get an update, because then whenever the new one comes forward, we can sort of talk to them about any issues that are still outstanding from Eddie's time, and how they're going to go forward with those.
Yeah, I think members are generally in agreement with that suggestion, Kelly. So thank you. Yeah, that would be very useful indeed. Okay, members, thank you for that. I will then move on to agenda item 3, which is the draft minutes, and which are contained at page 6 of your meeting pack there. Are members content to agree the minutes of 10th of October as drafted? Content, thank you, members. Some matters arising, members, then at agenda item 4. So at page 18, there's a reply from the Gambling Commission to committee queries on changes in relation to online gambling and associated regulatory activities. Over the coming months, further rule changes will come into effect to ensure fairness and transparency to customers, as well as to make gambling safer through a range of measures. This includes controls on remote game design, which come into force in January, and new requirements to allow consumers greater control over the type of direct marketing they receive, which will now be implemented in May 2025 to allow for technical changes which are needed. The Commission is also considering the responses it has received from a wide range of stakeholders on its further set of consultations from autumn 2023. These covered the topic of customer-led tools, transparency of customer funds, frequency of regulatory returns, and removing obsolete Commission requirements due to the Government's upcoming statutory levy. The response also sets out the Commission is due to publish a further consultation in the coming weeks focusing on gaming machine technical standards. So, members, any issues in relation to that? I think there is one particular issue. I would like to ask for an update maybe from the department about timescales for introducing gambling reforms. I think we should keep an eye on that. I know they have indicated that they're only potentially bringing partial reforms given the scale of it, but I think we need to keep an eye on that, so maybe a further update as to plans around that. And we are aware that we have sought to meet with the all-party group, I think, Clerk, on gambling to kind of get their feel for where things are at the present time. Brian?
Thank you, Chair, and just to welcome this information. And I assume we can take it that the online gambling regulations will apply in Northern Ireland. I know we're waiting on a specific bespoke piece to come through the Assembly at some stage, but can we assume that the online regulation, if it's going to be national level, will apply? Or can we get clarification on that?
Yeah, well, I wouldn't be overly... There does appear to be a bit of a vacuum. I have to say, we found this same kind of a situation with the Ofcom in terms of, whether or not their remit extends to here. So I think there is an issue around this that we need to keep... I'll just
Perhaps
check with the
clerk.
clerk.
We could seek clarity on that then.
Yeah.
Or if this is actually bypassing us, you know.
Yeah, it might be worth actually asking the Gambling Commission to brief us at a future meeting, because I think it's important to get it get a clear idea of what will be covered, what's not covered, where the gaps will lie, because it is an issue of huge concern, I have to say.
Members want to seek a briefing? From
Yeah, do members content to seek a briefing from the Commission? Gambling Commission, yeah, indicating. Go ahead, Kelly.
Sorry, no, I was just going to say this has been a concern since we did the gambling legislation last year, that it seems to be because those organisations or companies are offshore, they're not in Northern Ireland, but if they're elsewhere in the UK, we would like to think that we could be covered by that legislation to prevent harm. So yes, I'd be in agreement if we can get the Gambling Commission to explain exactly what the coverage is for Northern Ireland and protections.
Yeah. And maybe follow up with the all-party group in gambling, because I don't think we've had a response there, but it would be useful to, I know they've done a lot of work, and it would be useful to glean the information they've gathered. Okay, thank you for that then. Any other comments, members, or content to move on? Thank you. So at page 20 then, there's a department letter in relation to the local government pension scheme regulations. The department acknowledges that in making these regulations and bringing them into operation on 31st of August 2024, it has breached the 21-day rule, and the department apologises for this. Do members have any comments or a content to note? Content to note, thank you, members. At page 24, members, there's a reply from the Arts Council to committee queries in relation to the working and living conditions of artists. The correspondence explains that the advisory group was composed of 2 artists, 1 academic, a representative from the Department for Communities, and 2 Arts Council staff members. To select the 2 artists, a call for expression of interest was issued via social media. The plans across the sector to mitigate the current fiscal challenges include what's described as a current review of our systems of support and the programmes it runs. So, members, I would like to ask maybe for a time frame for the completion of that review that's mentioned there, and for a copy of the review once it is completed. If members are agree, we ask for both those. Yeah, thank you. Sian?
Yeah, Chair, thanks very much. I think I'd really like to ask the Arts Council to come in and give us a briefing, just I suppose, on the state of the sector, if possible, and if they're doing an overview and a review of their support programmes, I think it would be a really timely point for us to hear from them in terms of what they're actually able to deliver and where their pressure points are. Yep.
Members content that we consider that in the future for a future briefing?
Yep.
Yep. Thank you, members. Thank you, Sian. At page 25 then, members, a departmental reply to committee queries on housing issues, and it covers a number of our queries, this piece of correspondence. Firstly, the guidance which relates to the electrical safety standards for private tenancies, regulations NI 2024, is currently with the departmental design team for formatting in advance of laying the regulations under the draft affirmative assembly procedure. The department is in the process of transferring operational responsibility for its landlord registration scheme to councils in the anticipation that they will use their local knowledge and enforcement powers to better tackle non-compliant landlords and improve housing standards. The reply also contains details in relation to the affordable warrant scheme and the right to buy scheme, and on the transfer of the landlord registration scheme to councils. So going back, members, to the transfer of landlord registration schemes, I suggest we write to all the councils to ask if they have plans in place and the capacity and resources to deal with that, so that we won't see any sort of lag in the handover period. I also think it would be useful to establish the criteria around why Lisburn and Castlereagh, I think council was chosen to lead on this. I'd like to know what criteria was applied to that part of the decision. Ciara?
Just on that, obviously we welcome this landlord registry. Just 2 things. It would be interesting just to find out what is the new organisational structure going forward with the councils that being led by Lisburn and Castlereagh Council, and then likewise timelines regarding the new IT system being developed, and potentially what is the current budget available for its effective implementation. And then just secondly, in relation to the affordable warmth scheme.
Just before you go down here, members content that we add those questions?
Could we add on to Ciara's request there? What budget has been transferred from Stormont to the local councils to enable them to take on this extra work?
Yeah.
Because I'm sure there'll be staff implications and there will be IT issues and costs. So we can find that out too.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Ciara. then
Just
back
on to the third piece of that correspondence, the affordable warm scheme. I would like to get clarity on what is the potential unmet need, given the current cut in budget. And I know obviously they're going to wait the quality impact assessment and budget post October, but we all know the critical importance of the affordable warm scheme, and I'm gravely concerned that there's going to be a high level of unmet need if that budget's not increased. So I would like information on what is the potential unmet need currently and what they forecast could be potential unmet need by the end of this year, this financial year.
Met need now and forecast for the end of year.
Yeah.
Year end. Okay.
Yeah, and also I have to say, just to note, in terms of the right to buy, I mean, this is a particular situation where we know this year and potentially we're going to be selling more of the homes than we are going to be building, and the cost of those, given the rising, and we're hearing from the sector, the continuing rising homelessness numbers of individual people who are homeless. I think that's something that I think really should be revisited. I know we've heard the department has no plans at present, but I think that's something that we need to be thinking about really seriously. Kelly?
Thank you, Chair. As a committee, I wonder if all would be in agreement that we could write to the Minister to ask if there's any way to halt during this housing crisis the right to buy scheme for the housing executive. It does beg our belief that they're still able to sell houses that are not being replaced while our housing crisis continues. Perhaps we could ask the Minister, we've hit 10,000 people who are on the list recognised as homeless. Although the figures that Simon Community have said are 80,000 people. I'm just wondering, do we set a criteria in this while there are over 5,000, on that waiting list? The right to buy must be suspended. I appreciate there may be legislation required for this, but there has to be some way that we can stall or prevent those houses being sold at this stage while there's a housing crisis.
Yeah, and I think there has been significant, and it might be maybe worthwhile maybe asking Reyes to give us a briefing, because I think this has been addressed in Scotland and Wales, and maybe is in the process of being addressed. So it's not only here that this is an issue, and I think it's being moved on elsewhere, and we could finish up lagging behind significantly in that respect. I'll come to you in a minute, Daniel Morris.
Just for information, could we find out how many houses that have been sold through right to buy? The families that live in them, they pass on, they give them back to their immediate family, they sell them off and split the money between them, etc. But they end up in the private sector and become private rentals. How many of the right to buy homes have actually ended up in the private sector as rental homes? If we could find that information.
Members content with that, Daniel?
Yeah, it just follows on from Morris's point. First of all, I would say quite a significant number, because beyond the initial person that purchases it, families tend to sell these homes off, and they do end up in the private sector. There's quite a significant number of them that I'm aware of. We do need a moratorium on this. This is actually putting the future of the housing executive at serious risk. If we're continuing not to build new social homes for the housing executive, and the current stock is depleting through the sales of this scheme, then it really raises a question about the future of the housing executive, because the stocks are completely continuing to deplete. So we need a moratorium of some sort in relation to it. And there's people that have different opinions on this, and I understand it, but we have to reflect on the times we are in, and we are most certainly in a housing crisis. And I think whether the Minister agrees with that or not, he must understand that the current circumstances is just not good, particularly when there is no budget, as he has already admitted, to build new homes this year. So in the interim, until such times that changes, I think a moratorium on sales through this scheme needs to happen.
Okay, thank you, Kelly. Is your hand back up again there on that, or?
It is, yes. Just Chair, I think that there is a rule that if someone purchases their housing executive home, given the fact that they would get maybe the full discount, that they can't sell on that home within a certain period of time without forfeiting, I think, some or all of the profit from the sale. I think there is a length of time. If we could get maybe clarification from the housing executive on the rules regarding the right to buy scheme and selling the houses on, because I think people have to hold on to them for a length of time before they would be permitted. The only way I imagine that we would be able to find out if a home has changed to somewhere that can be rented, is if there's a change of use, but that would be through LPS or through the councils, perhaps, if there's an application for a change of use and planning. So it might be quite a difficult one for the housing executive or the department to provide for us. I don't know whether they would have that data.
Well, let's ask the question and we'll see where the trail takes us in that regard. I think it's 5 years is the period of time that we're talking.
5 years.
I suppose I concur with each and every one of us where I believe there should be some kind of moratorium for now. We're not against people obviously purchasing their homes, but given the crisis that we're in, a moratorium. But it has been addressed on the Assembly floor with the Minister, and if I can recall, he was saying no, but we can ask again. It's just what I wanted to ask, and I did raise it at the previous meeting, is regarding the capital receipts. With the sale, and obviously just the average around 500, I think it was 360 house sales, and it was always, from my knowledge, that the housing executive received the capital receipt investment back in, where they then invested in the likes of repair grants, in the likes of affordable warmth schemes. Their answer is that the reinvestment is applied on an annual basis subject to budget availability. So I'd like to ask, subject to budget availability, will the housing executive have access to the capital receipts this year, and have they had access to the capital receipts over the last 5 years, say?
Yeah, and to what percentage, given that it is subject to content, Clerk, with that?
Capital receipts this year, and have they had for the last 5 years?
Yes.
And I agree with all the comments that have been made. Now, this is a scheme that's open to abuse, and what I say is probably the most significant abuse of it is that where speculators come along, and they know some guys in the house who's there a long time, and they offer him cash to apply to buy this house, and them knowing that down the line they're going to come into possession of it. So the guy buys it, and gets full discount, but at the same time probably is not getting the return on his house that he should have expected, but because of his own state of poverty is there to be used and abused by these other speculators, and I know that does go on.
Yeah. No, and go ahead, Brian. Yeah.
Well, just I'm not sure where we are on the issue of the right to buy. If the committee is taking a position on that, I mean, a moratorium on the right to buy is not our party position. So, just to make that clear. But if that's the majority view of the committee, so be it. But just to put on the record, that's not our party position. A moratorium on the right to buy, we see it as a route into home ownership for many people of lower income, and where a home that they've lived in for years, that they're able then to purchase it and become a homeowner. I understand entirely the concerns over the dwindling social housing stock, and I would support the current arrangement where housing association properties are not available for right to buy, which are newer stock. And I appreciate some will say, oh, it's okay, you're saying people are buying older stock, but it is, at least it provides that option for people in those housing executive properties. So anyway, it's just, we would have to put on record that is not our party position.
My request, Chair, through you, is to find the information.
Yeah, and I think that's key. We're asking a series of questions here. We're discussing a series of options. We're also fundamentally asking Reyes to provide us with some further information as well around what has happened in other places. So I think we take it step by step in a sense, but I think it's useful that we certainly bottom out the information across the range of requests that are already there. Daniel?
Chair, I think we have to be very clear. There's nobody from my knowledge around this table that is against the right to buy scheme. Everybody wants to lift our people out of the traps of poverty, etc., and ensure they have access to sufficient opportunities. But there's a very blunt fact that we as legislators in this House need to accept. We don't have anything to sell. Like, party policy is one thing, but reality is a very different one. And the fact is, Chair, that today in Northern Ireland we do not have sufficient housing stock to sell. We're selling what we do not have, and we cannot afford to sell. That's the point. And if we continue in this trajectory, and we are building no houses or a minimal amount, and selling more,
some social
and
houses.
selling more, Chair, selling more than we are building, then we are leading to what can only be described as the slow death of the Northern Ireland Housing Executive. That's the reality. That's the reality. And maybe that might be a party policy based on, but it's certainly not one I support. I support the Northern Ireland Housing Executive and its important function here. So I just want to put that very clear. We have to waken up to the very real threat that exists here, Chair. If we do not build housing executive houses, the housing executive will disappear if we continue selling at the rate we're selling in a number of years. It's a threat. The future of the housing executive is now in question because of the behaviour and the policies of some parties in this House.
Thank you, Daniel. Kelly?
Just very quickly, Chair, Brian's right, it won't be the decision of the committee, it'll be the decision of the ONS whether or not to remove the right to buy from the housing executive. To be honest, Daniel's right as well. You know, the housing executive will change. It is going to change whenever the reform comes forward. The landlord side will be separate and be treated exactly the same as every other housing association. So the right to buy will go irrespective of what anybody's party position is, because legally that's the position. What would be more important is to see how the housing authority section works and the policies it brings forward. But to be honest, it's not completely out of our hands, but it will be for the ONS to decide. It's a legal parameter that they're allowed to have the right to buy under, and it's for ONS to come forward and make that decision.
Brian, briefly, if you can, please.
Yes, I don't want to prolong this debate. I mean, obviously, just to put in the record too, I mean, our minister stated our position from my party that we very much support the housing executive gaining the right to borrow against its asset to enable the construction of more social housing. So we very much see a positive future for the housing executive and wish to see that social housing element increase. I want to raise one other matter from this letter, if I may.
Go ahead.
There's a sentence there under private landlord registry, third paragraph. We're currently exploring whether there is potential to identify unregistered landlords through a data matching project using data sources such as housing benefit. This work is at a very early stage. I would have thought that wouldn't be very complicated to do, that if someone applies for housing benefit in a private rental, that officials would be checking, is this property on the private landlord registry? So I'm surprised to read that that's at an early stage. I'd have thought that wouldn't be difficult to implement and should be in place if we want all private rentals to be on the registration scheme. Maybe we need to get an update on the operation of that scheme.
Yep. Okay, so members content we seek an update on the operation?
Maybe a question totally unrelated to what we're discussing, but we always hear that there's trouble for infrastructure, water, wastewater, sewage, etc. Could we contact the Department of Infrastructure and ask for a breakdown constituency by constituency what the issues are in the provision of wastewater, water and sewage? It seems to be a blanket approach.
Yep. Okay, yeah, we can do that. Okay, thank you, members. So moving on then to page 45, then there's a departmental reply on public sector transformation proposals. This reply contains a written briefing on the department's public sector transformation proposals, Warm Healthy Homes pilot, Community Empowerment Digital Transformation Project and Digital Transformation for PRONI National Archives. Do members have any comments or are they content to note that? Content, thank you. At page 50, there's a reply on the social inclusion strategies. The correspondence outlined the Minister will bring a draft anti-poverty strategy to the Executive in early 2025 for consideration. The correspondence also sets out the Minister will be writing to his Executive colleagues before the end of October to outline the next steps in developing the disability strategy. Details of the proposals for the gender equality and sexual orientation strategies will follow later in the year. And co-design groups were convened to provide advice and guidance on the development of the strategies and assist in stakeholder engagement. The response sets out that officials plan to fully engage with the committee on each of the strategies once work has progressed. This will be in advance of public consultation. So there's a couple of things I want to say in relation to that. First of all, disappointed that there appears to be, and I'm not convinced that it's what should be happening is to decouple the progress of all of these. These are all key strategies that have been agreed are essential, and the department has had some time now to move them forward. I also would like further information and clarification around early 2025. We have been told that's January 2025. I think we should seek an assurance that that will be no later than January 2025. In relation to co-design groups were convened, those groups have been seeking to once again engage with the department, and I think it would be in everyone's interest that the department would engage with those groups. They're obviously very acutely aware of the details of these plans. They've already contributed, and if there's a review, I think it would be appropriate that those, and we have heard from someone directly in committee, that those groups would be included in that at this point in the strategies. But I think they need to be brought, fundamentally, they need to be brought with all due haste. These policies have been sitting in draft form since the Minister took up office, and I think we need to see the Department moving on them really more robustly and urgently than we're seeing. Kelly, first of all.
Chair, can we ask for an update from the Department to give very clear understanding for the committee of the delay on bringing these strategies forward until January 2025? Will that have an impact on the budget process? Because these strategies are supposed to influence not just the Department for Communities, but all departments. But if they're already putting forward their budget proposals for a potential 2-year budget, if these strategies aren't in place, then how are they going to influence and ensure that they actually can be adopted and taken on board by each of the departments to deliver their intended outcomes, if they haven't been included in the budget process? So if we could ask for clarification, in publishing in January, will there actually be enough time for all of the actions that are required for the outcomes will be taken forward by each department and included in their budgets?
Yeah, so members content that we seek that information. Also bear in mind that we will have the Minister coming to committee. So there's Sian.
Yeah, it was just to reiterate, Chair, obviously, I think, excuse me, I've been speaking particularly to the co-design group for the anti-poverty strategy, who do feel that they put an awful lot of work into that strategy and have requested meetings with the Minister and haven't heard anything back. Now, I do believe that a letter was sent after our committee last week to members of the anti-poverty co-design group, and they have got in touch with me to say that they've received a letter thanking them for their work and reassuring them that work was ongoing. So I think it'll be really good to hear from the Minister next week in terms of which groups he has been meeting in terms of that anti-poverty strategy. And as Kelly said, what is the delay with it? We have been asking for this since I think about March, and then the process isn't aligning with that budget setting process, and that is a big worry, because a strategy is only as good as the resources that is actually put in behind it to strengthen it.
Thank you, Sian. Any other comment, members? Okay, members, thank you. Moving on to at page 53 then, there's a reply from the National Museums on the detail of its current work. The NMNA has provided a copy of its current corporate strategy, which outlines its key priorities and responsibilities, and its published annual reviews for 21-22 and 22-23, and their draft annual review 23-24. They're currently in the process of drafting their next corporate strategy, which will take them from 25 to 2030, which it hopes to launch for public consultation by the end of November. Any comments or content to note? Content, thank you. And finally, members, just to advise that the Operational Delivery Group, who manage the committee queries on the WSP, that's the waiver and the Carers Allowance overpayments, has offered to brief the committee on both subject areas if required. We have written to officials with a range of questions on both these topics, so I would ask committee members if they are content or would they seek the briefing. And I suppose I should also just flag up and actually to welcome that there is reporting now that the Department for Work and Pensions is going to launch an independent review of this process. I think that's appropriate. It's welcome. The committee has written recently to the DWP asking them and expressing our concerns around the overpayment situation, and previously around our concerns around the carers payment in general. And there are a lot of very significant issues with carers payment around the cliff edge for overpayments, which takes all of your carers allowance out. So I certainly think it would be appropriate for the department to take this opportunity now to review the entire operation of the payment as well as the overpayments situation. So if members will be content, I think we maybe should write to DWP and ask them to ensure that this payment is looked at very seriously, because we're being told, and we know that from our own work, carers are having to give up work to continue the caring role. And I mean that is, and then all of the poverty and all of the issues that can generate. So a benefit that meant to protect some of our most vulnerable people who are doing some of the most valuable work in our community, I think has to be fit for purpose. And it's been a repeated issue now for a number of years around the problems and how people are falling into the poverty trap because they have to take on a caring role. So members content we do that right to the department, and our members then content that we take up the offer from the department to have a briefing on this subject.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed, yeah.
Great, thanks members. Members, moving on to item 5, correspondence, the memo for which is at page 159. Members have any comments on any item of correspondence, or are they content to note? Members content to note. Thank you. So members, then, the next agenda item is legal advice to the committee. So I propose that we move to closed session for the next briefing session. Are members agreed?
Agreed, yeah.
Also, for the committee deliberations on the pensions bill, it is normal practice for this to be in closed session, so members can formulate their opinions before undertaking the clause-by-clause review. So are members agreed that this also takes place in closed session?
Agreed.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so I would ask the clerk to take us out of broadcasting, and we await confirmation then for a few minutes while that.
Committee Room 29. Sound. 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 Committee Room 29, 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 sound. Committee Room 29. 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 Sound. Committee Room 29, 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 Sound.
Let me know when we're to open, please.
We're going to commence the open vote. Okay. Open now.
Okay, members, so thank you. We're back into open session and picking up again at agenda item 8. So we were going to consider the clause by clause, the formal clause by clause consideration of the pensions extension of automatic enrolment bill. However, we have discussed a potential amendment to that bill along the lines that once the powers in the bill are used and commenced, the Department will review, report and lay with the Assembly information on the impacts of the changes within 3 years. So I now want to invite Hayley Ward and Richard Jordan and welcome them to the table here. Thank you for attending today, and we have some queries following an earlier session, one of which is around the issue of that amendment. So can I ask you, Hayley, if the Department would be prepared to consider an amendment along that line, given the committee discussions on this issue?
Yeah. Can you confirm what the amendment you'd actually want, a review?
The amendment would be that once the powers in the bill are used and commenced, that the Department will review, report and lay with the Assembly information on the impacts of the changes within 3 years.
Okay. So, I mean, the ASH report is an annual survey, Richard?
Good policy development normally includes, always should include a review process of the implementation of the policy. We use the annual survey of hours and earnings, the ASH NI survey, which is UK-wide, but we have an NI component which is carried out by NISRA, and it provides data on employees, their participation in workplace pensions by industry, by area, by age, and we would intend to continue to use that to assess the effectiveness, or the change, if you like, in pension participation rates following the implementation by the subordinate regulation. So
okay, yeah, so
Kelly has her hand up.
Kelly, go ahead. Yeah.
Sorry, thank you, Chair. And I appreciate that the Department may well look into and have reviews, but an amendment such as this placing on the face of the bill, because of the situation that committees find themselves in after RHI, the scrutiny method that we need to use and to ensure that we future-proof would be that we prefer to see an obligation with yourselves. Would there be an issue or with us having that on the face of the bill for a report, because we need to find out if this is working, if the age limit is lowered, how many people are taking this up or not. It's just to make sure that the Assembly is informed and there's papers laid for us.
Well, the ASH survey does look at the age categories of those who participate in pension saving. Because the numbers of people in the age range 16 to 21 is quite low in terms of their participation, the data for that isn't robust, it's not reliable, and there's no way around that. ASH is a survey of the working age population in Northern Ireland. We use it every year, and that is our main route. There is no other route in terms of the data collection that's available to us.
Well, I suppose I would be concerned in that you're saying it's not robust and reliable. The one you're pointing us towards will be the main source of reassurance and review is not reliable. Then I would suggest that in itself is a concern.
It's a concern, but that's because automatic enrolment doesn't currently apply to people under the age of 22. So the
but what we want to know
low.
is what the impact is of changing that.
Exactly, and as the numbers of those under the age of 22 increase in terms of their pension participation, the numbers become apparent and visible and statistically reliable.
So that being the case, then it wouldn't seem to me overly onerous for the department to take the information and lay it with the Assembly.
And that's the question that I guess Hayley will talk on.
Yeah, I mean, that isn't a decision for officials, unfortunately. That would need to go back to Minister in order to consider. And also, we in the department don't actually draft the bill. The Office for Legislative Counsel drafts the bill and decides on what provisions are sensible for to be in the bill. So we would need to get legal advice.
Yeah,
from
well, and that's understood, Hayley. I think that is understood. We are asking that you initiate that process, and we will concurrently also be looking at and have asked for a draft to be drafted for us for consideration. But I think we're all agreed that given the value of this, it would be reasonable and beneficial for the department to consider making the amendment and bring. But I understand. I'm not asking you for an answer, but I will take your commitment to looking at this urgently, given I suppose time and that. And can you reply by next week then to us?
Certainly aim to. It will have to go through Minister, so we will do our best. We do need to consider any unintended consequences that this may do or set precedents. It's not something that I'm certainly aware of that would normally be in a bill or a requirement on the department. So we are going to need to consider that, but we will do so as quickly as possible.
Okay, thank you. So members, any other questions? Sorry, Kelly, go ahead. Yeah.
Just going to say, I don't necessarily agree with the precedent. I wrote a private members bill in the last mandate that included very distinct and clearly laid out requirements for review and reporting back for the Assembly. I just would be concerned that there is a feeling that it goes to the Minister and he'll decide. Actually, if the Minister decides not to take it forward, I think it would be clear to say that, or the understanding would be that the committee would. So it's probably in the department's best interest if there's certain ways how you want to word this, you could certainly take that on board and take that forward. But as the chair has said, we will be bringing forward our own drafting on that.
Yeah, and I'm not, I have to say, generally overly enamoured with precedent being used as a reason not to do things. All good improvements happen for a first time at some point, so we should never be overly concerned, if this is going to be a positive change. I also agree with Kelly. I know from direct experience in the last mandate as chair of the Health Committee, there was reviews built into several key pieces of legislation, and it wasn't I don't think it is a precedent. I think it has happened and is in place for other pieces. But anyway, I think I'll take that commitment that you're going to do that. And then, Brian, go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Chair. And again, I'm just looking into the the impact of this bill. It's a very short bill, and we can all see the benefits of extending automatic enrolment, especially to young people, that they don't have to reach the age of 22 before, and it's put the obligation on the employer, obviously, to make sure that young people. I've been asking officials questions about the actual wider impact of this. So this bill will give the power, or the department, the power to reduce the minimum, the age at which people will be automatically enrolled from 20, to reduce it from 22, and the explanatory notes at paragraph 9 makes clear that the intention is to reduce it from 22 to 18. Again, just clarifying from my own understanding that the income threshold at which automatic enrolment must take place will remain at 10,000 of an income, but the lower limit of the earnings band on which your pension contributions are calculated, the department will have the power to reduce that, which is currently 6,240, and to reduce that. And I think the intention to reduce it down to zero, or to reduce it possibly in phases. That's my first question. It does say in the notes to either reduce or repeal the lower limit of that earnings band. And so, what is the current intention on that? And second, will that have to come back to the Assembly, to the committee, each time there is a reduction? And the third point, I suppose, is that my understanding is that will actually impact on all employees, and will increase both their personal contribution to the pension by, if it's reduced down to zero, be it more or less an extra €5 a week, but they'll also get their employees contributing more, at 3%, if it's at 5% and 3%. But we're told that many employers already calculate the pension contributions from the first pound earned. Have you done any assessment of how many employers have reduced the lower limit of the earnings band? How many are operating from the first pound earned from zero? So, in terms of understanding the wider impact of this bill.
So at the moment, it is the intention to reduce and then repeal, but the policy is still in development, so I can't confirm that 100%, but that is the intention.
Possibly not all in one go? No.
It's to allow both employers and employees time to adjust to the increased contributions.
Mm-hmm.
So the subordinate rule would come to the Assembly and to the committee for scrutiny. It's likely the rule would include the phasing and the amount of reduction for each step, but that hasn't yet been developed, so we don't know. But if we were to phase it in, I suspect that's the way it would go. So the committee and the Assembly would get a scrutiny of that. Okay. In terms of employers and their contributions to pensions, many employers.
Sorry, before we move on there, you said it was likely it would include phasing, and what was the other?
Well, we have two routes, which is to abolish the lower earnings threshold. The other route is to reduce it over time, in the same way as AE itself was introduced over time. So if the SR would either abolish it, or it would phase in the reductions in steps, all of which would be clearly defined in the regulation itself. Whichever route was decided upon in development, the SR would come to the committee and the Assembly for its usual scrutiny.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Yep.
Sorry to jump in. And in terms of maintaining parity with GB, and we recognise that many employers, are employing people across the UK, they would probably see an advantage to having the same scheme.
Absolutely.
What is the current position in GB, or does it vary between the different jurisdictions? Does the 6240 apply in GB currently?
Yes.
And is it likely that we would maintain parity then, if on reductions applying across the UK?
Absolutely.
Right.
I mean, the pension schemes in the UK is effectively a single system of pensions because there are pension schemes that go across all the jurisdictions. That's why we aim to keep parity with GB and why we have brought forward this bill to ensure that we have the same powers as GB, so that when they, or if and when they decide to reduce the age and the lower earnings limit, then we're in the same position to keep parity.
And GB are ahead of us in that they have the primary powers in place now. They've had them in place since September 2023. We're playing catch up for the powers, but we hope to bring the regulations in tandem to maintain that approach across both jurisdictions.
But those powers will not be enacted till they're enacted across the water. Is that
Yes.
To maintain the integrity of the
powers
water.
sitting there? But once it gets enacted there, then it gets enacted here. Yeah.
And my last question, just to remind you, because I asked several in one go, have you done any assessment of questioning officials previously? And I'm saying about this will affect all employees, and they were suggesting that a number of employers actually do calculate the pension contributions either on the full salary from zero. Have you done any assessment of that?
So the requirements of automatic enrolment are the minimum requirement, including the lower earnings limit. So the lower earnings limit does apply to every single worker. However, depending on the individual pension scheme, some people will be paying pension contributions on the whole of their earnings rather than not the 6,240 at the start. In short, no, we don't have stats to show how many people that falls under. But we do know that national figures show that 55% of employers have more generous pension schemes than what is set out as the minimum requirement for automatic enrolment.
Right. Okay. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Can I also ask Hayley what the policy rationale for the original 6240 figure was? So what was the rationale for having a figure in the original?
That was linked to the lower band of national insurance threshold. And the other side of the coin is the 50,000 figure for the upper earnings threshold was linked to the higher band of national insurance as well. So that's been there for a long time now.
Thank you. Members, any other questions for Hayley or Richard? No, I don't think so. So just I suppose to say that we will need an urgent response there in relation to the potential amendment, because we have to consider this for our next meeting, so just to flag that up. But for now, I think I can thank Hayley and Richard for your attendance and for addressing members' questions, and we will be back to you then, or we'll be speaking to you again now in due course. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, members. So members, as we had requested a draft amendment there, we cannot proceed with clause by clause today, so I'm going to move on. An early draft of the committee report without the information from today's meeting has been included in meeting papers at page 366. I would ask that members take this away for further reading, with particular focus on the draft recommendations, and we will consider it in full detail with a view to agreeing the content at next week's meeting.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. Clerk, you can help with that all?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So members, moving on to agenda item 9, Child Support Enforcement Bill, and it's an overview of the call for evidence. So the call for evidence on citizen space closed on 4th of October and only attracted one response. The committee team has directly contacted many organisations, and it is hopeful that 2 or 3 of those organisations will agree to brief on the bill, as well as a briefing from departmental officials, preceded by a bill briefing from RAISE, which has been pencilled in for 7th of November. I do understand the bill is technical in nature, but thought I should ask members if there is potentially any other organisation or group that members feel we could or should specifically target to ask to provide oral evidence in relation to that matter. The only one, but I'm not aware at this point of a specific group, but just an issue I've raised is around the issue of north-south, especially in border communities where people may live. So if I identify a group that might have any knowledge on that, could I let you know, Clerk, and we can share with members. So, members content then to...
Chair,
go
can
ahead?
I ask maybe if I don't know, the Law Society, the Children's Law Centre, if they have any comments on it because of the impact that it would have to children, you know,
They are
the
one of the
result of-
ones we have asked already.
Both, yeah.
Yeah, both those, yes. Okay, so if there's any other recourse to members, please let us know. There's a matter of urgency. Okay, thank you. So members, moving on to agenda item 10, which is an SR 2024/0000, the Electrical Safety Standards for Private Tenancies Regulations, NI 2024, on page 405. So members, we considered the SL1 for this rule at the meeting on the 12th of September, when we were content for the department to proceed making the rule. Have members any objection to the rule? No. Thank you, members. So therefore, can I put the following question? That the Committee for Communities has considered SR 2024/0000, the Electrical Safety Standards for Private Tenancies Regulations, NI 2024, and recommends that it is confirmed by the Assembly. Are members agreed? Agreed. Thank you, members. Agenda item 10, Forward Work Programme, a copy of which is at page 429. So can I ask members then, second. So members, I'm just checking if members are content with the draft Forward Work Programme, or any comments they wish to make? No, content, thank you. And agenda item 11, members, any other business? Committee
Sorry,
members?
Chair, can I just come in there about that the Forward Work Programme? Do we
Yeah.
know how much time we have with the Minister next week?
That's for 1 hour.
We've asked for 1 hour, Kelly, yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So, any other business, members? No? Yeah, go ahead.
Just back on the Forward Work Programme, I presume we'll have other briefings that will slot in there, just looking after recess, because although we've set time aside for the Child Support Enforcement Bill, I imagine it won't fill, the full committee meetings.
Yeah, there is a potential, I think, that we're getting, maybe we could have other legislation, but...
We're expecting another bill.
Yeah.
Right.
I think
It's just, even in terms of the number of responses we're getting is low so far, so... but anyway, we'll have time to review that as we go along.
Yeah, and we also need to do some strategic planning as well to look at priorities and that. So okay then, so moving on to agenda item 12 then, members, date, time and location of the next meeting. The next meeting will be at 10 a.m. on Thursday, 24th of October 2024, here in room 29 in Parliament Buildings. The meeting is now adjourned, and I would ask for committee staff to take us out of broadcasting, and that will take a minute or two.
Committee Room 29. Sound. 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 Committee Room 29, Sound.